Okay, so for our group assignment, we were to make a presentation about repeated reasoning. I'm Corey.
I'm Shelby.
I'm Jalissa.
So your first question obviously is, what is repeated reasoning and how do you express that through regularity in your classroom? Well, little Jimmy here has no idea what 5 times 2 is because he does not know his multiplication facts. He was not there the day they learned them, and he has no idea what's going on when it comes to multiplication at all. But he knows that multiplication is just addition. It's a simplified set for addition. So what little Jimmy does is he counts on his finger 5 times for adding 2. So 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 10. And he finds the answer. That is a way of using repeated reasoning. He found that there was a pattern in his addition. And because he knew that multiplication is addition, and he used that pattern to his advantage using that shortcut that he did on his hand, and he found the answer. That is what repeated reasoning is all about. Using the patterns that you know and the things that you know in problems, and then using the shortcut if you can't figure out what the problem is, and then finding the formula, and then you can either use the formula or keep using the shortcut, whatever works for you. What is the best way that you understand what's going on during that problem in math?
Okay, so addition and subtraction. So the most thought of way to get to 10 is adding 5 plus 5. And so addition and subtraction kind of go along together. If we know that 5 plus 5 equals 10, we know 10 minus 5 equals 5. But as we see on the picture at the bottom here, there's 11 different ways we can get to 10 by adding different numbers. So one of the ways is 7 plus 3. So we know that 7 plus 3 equals 10. And so if we have a subtraction problem and it's like 10 minus 7, we know it's going to be 3 because 7 plus 3 equals 10. So then 10 minus 7 would have to be 3. And it works for any other problem. Like we can do 8 plus 2 equals 10. So 10 minus 8 equals 2. And I feel like that would help with like younger kids, especially when they're first learning about this. They can add and subtract numbers by just thinking this plus that equals this number. So take 10 minus whatever number it is, and then you get the same number. Even if you add or subtract, it's the same thing.
And like addition and subtraction go together, multiplication and division go together. So if we know that 2 times 6 equals 12, and we ask students how they could solve this using division instead, they would be able to take their already known math fact of 2 times 6 equaling 12, and given the problem 12 divided by 6 equals what, they would be able to plug that in knowing that 2 is the answer because 2 times 6 would get them 12. So it's kind of just it's repeated reasoning. It's going back and forth between multiplication and division using what facts you already know to be able to answer problems that you don't know. And using the knowledge from students, they have the knowledge from addition and multiplication, subtraction, division from grades like 1 through 3, applying that knowledge to when they're learning math in grades 4 through 8 and going back when we're teaching and saying, remember this from when we did this. Then when they know that 6 plus 6 equals 12, then when we're teaching them the multiplication of that, 2 times 6 equals 12, then it's easier for them to relate that and then find the easiest way for them to solve that in the future.
And a ratio is a really good example of repeated reasoning if you can't figure out what the cross multiplication and division formula is. And little Jimmy here has no idea. He was gone the day that they were talking about cross multiplication division and doing ratios in his math class. But he kind of understands what to do by doing some of that repeated reasoning. So Jimmy is driving to his grandma's for Thanksgiving for every hour of drive time, and he uses about 2.5 gallons of gasoline for every hour. So like I said, Jimmy has no idea what to do when it comes to his ratio at all in cross multiplication division. So what he does is he knows that 1 hour equals 2.5 gallons of gasoline. So what he does is he just multiplies 2.5 gallons of gasoline times 2 hours. And then he gets the answer for that box, which is 5. But he needs to find out how much gas is for 30 minutes. So instead of multiplying to find 30 minutes, he divides 1 hour divided by 2.5 and finds out that 2.5 divided by 2 is 1.25 gallons of gasoline. And then he multiplies 2.5 times 7 and then adds on the 1.25 gallons at the end. And by using that repeated reasoning, he found the answer. And he did the same thing with number 10. And he, just keep working through the problems, teaching your kids to just keep going, and there's not always one way to figure something out, because math just builds on itself all across, no matter where you start from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. The math you learn at that is always building up, and you can find certain ways and certain loopholes and things to do, so you can figure out how to get those answers if you don't know what's going on.
So I think overall, repeated reasoning can go into whatever subject you're teaching. Like for addition and subtraction, you don't have to, if you're trying to get to a certain number, you don't have to add just the two numbers that you were taught at school or that your teacher taught you. If you can think of other ways to get to that number and it's easier for you to remember, I think it's just do whatever is easiest for you is what I would say to students. If they find a different way to get to the same answer, then that would be better for them if they're adding or subtracting the numbers that you give them or the numbers that they think of on their own that come up with the same number.
Yeah, and to go off of that, when kids are doing multiplication and division in their classes, it's sometimes easier for one student to do division one way and another student to do division another way, and that's completely fine as long as they know their way to solve it and they're able to solve it using correct formulas and that are going to get them the right answer, then that's fine. And an example with multiplication of doing this a different way, instead of just doing 5 times 5 equals 25, a student might be able to draw 5 circles on a piece of paper and then put 5 dots in each one and say, this is 5 times, and this is how I get 25. Versus another student who might just automatically know right off the bat that 5 times 5 equals 25.
And then another way of doing that is let's say 9 times 9 is 81, but you don't know what 9 times 10 is. You just add 9 onto that. And some students find that a lot easier when they're working through their multiplication facts, because that's how I really honestly learned my multiplication facts is through repeated reasoning and stuff like that. But like I said, just encourage kids to keep working, use the stuff that they know to help find the answer to the problem, look for those shortcuts, figure out what is the repeating calculations you're running over and over, and most likely your mathematically proficient students are already understanding this, and it's just kind of helping those kids that are a little bit slower with math and that can't understand it quite as well, just helping them understand that, hey, there's more than one way to actually do this math problem.
And giving them those ways to do it as well.
That's for sure.